what is a one-to-one function? So if I have a graph of parabola, anybody remember what was the definition of function? What was the test we were doing if something is a function or not? Let's start with that.
The domain and range?
The domain and range. But there was a test we were doing to whether something is a function or not. Anybody remember what test was it? It's called what? It's called vertical test. You guys remember the vertical test? If you draw a vertical line through a graph like this, and if I move this vertical line throughout the graph, and if this vertical line intercepts your graph at one point and one point only, then we conclude that is a function, right? So obviously in this case, so the one at the top is a function, the graph of the bottom one is not a function because it intercepts this in more than one point here, as you see here. For the one-to-one function, we can use a horizontal test. If you draw a horizontal line through a graph, like in this case here, the one that we already established, this is a function. First one is a function. That is a function. So this passed that vertical test. And this is not a function. So if you do have a function like the first case, this one, although it's a function, it's not a one-to-one function. Because for the one-to-one function, you do a horizontal test. If you have a horizontal line, and if your horizontal line intercepts your graph in more than one point, like let's just pick up some numbers here. Let's say this is 2, and this is -2, and this is 1. So at this point here, we have 2 and 1. This point here is -2 and 1. 2 and 1. So if the second number repeats itself, that means this is not a one-to-one function. It is a function, but it's not a one-to-one function. So in this case, if I look at the same number, say this is 2, and this is 1, and this is -1. So these points here that cause our graph not to be a function would be 2 and 1. And this point here would be 2 and -1. See, if the first number repeats itself within the group, then it's not a function. But if the second number repeats itself, then it's not a one-to-one function. So let's look at this idea and look at some of these definitions that we have here, if it makes sense. So here it says that consider a function defined by a set of points x and y in a rectangular coordinate system. Then y is a one-to-one function of x if no horizontal line intercepts the graph in more than one point. That's exactly what we're talking about. So if you have a graph and you draw a line, horizontal line, like this, and if this horizontal line here intercepts your graph more than one point, then we say this is not a one-to-one function. So let's take a look at the second definition here we have. So the necessary condition for a function f to have an inverse function is that no two ordered curve in f has different x coordinate and the same y coordinate. A function that satisfies this condition is called a one-to-one function. So in order for a function to have an inverse function, we're going to talk about inverse function in detail in future. very soon, is that there has to be one-to-one function in order to have an inverse function. So let's take a look at the other definition that we had earlier on the previous session. Here's the function for which every element of the range y of the function corresponds to exactly one element of the element x. In other words, we say the same thing here. We're saying that we are not supposed to have 2 points right next to each other. So bottom line is, if you want to know whether something is a function, you just use a vertical test. But if you want to make sure it's the one-to-one function, use a horizontal test. If you use a horizontal test, and that indicates that horizontal line intercepts your graph more than 1 point, then you would say that is not a one-to-one function. Otherwise, then it would be a one-to-one function. Can somebody give me an example of a graph that is a one-to-one function then? Let me draw a graph here. What would be the graph of, can somebody give me an example of the graph that is a one-to-one function then? Those of you are following this slide. Is this a one-to-one function? Is this graph a one-to-one function? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, that's a one-to-one function, right? Because it does pass the horizontal test. If I draw a horizontal line here, it's going to intercept my graph exactly at 1 point.